Yeah, I'm gonna get a quick lighting. I don't even know what time it is right now. It's been August of 2024. Yeah, I think it's the August. Wow, what is it? Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it's the 10th, August 10th, 2024. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So like, I'm getting a quick lighting because um, yeah, I was gonna say some stuff about it, and ultimately I've been focusing predominantly on quite a bit about the memory minus the fact of being 35 and like state capital of Austin and alphanumeric 84 as compared to the Social Security Administration's last four of the 1-800-772 1213 and the 1213 being like LNM and ultimately 64 and 65 and then 83 and 84 based upon the last four of the Social Security Administration and some point of like in the book Six of the Temple How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, the chapter Winners and Losers and how and my thoughts involving the McDonald's Golden Arches represent a degree level a reputable standards of consensual participation given the side by side thing about the um, the alignment in the parallel universe, given the whole different perception as a difference between what an electronic schematic fish would look like of 1 cycle per second and oscillation measuring 1 cycle with the half above and half below what would be considered the center line of measuring cycles per second and oscillation, and based upon the thought of the chronological issue and logic circuitry thing about that, and how the carbon footprint gives that impression of at a great level of reputable standards of consensual participation in that way of chronological, yet in a whole new different perception that ultimately leads to the mind's eye. It seems to be like a military burial deterrent of some issues like that would really reflect the part about the mind's eye of before it is written. And the thing about that I've been like really kind of focusing on is really because of the memory of like a memory minus the fact of being 35, advances low 30 as compared to secret de facto. In terminology that seems to be predominantly in my mind involving like television programming as well as certain factors of like whether or not it's available closed caption for the hearing impaired would be distinguishable idea of like a separation between church and state as compared to legal media and deposition or auditing MP4 format of like television as compared to live on air transmission and involving quite a bit about the television programming live auditing legal media that way, and the last four of the Social Security Administration's telephone number being like 12 and 13 and a combine of like legal media. Um, uh-huh. Yeah, so like in any case, yeah, so I was kind of like thinking about the for it is written part about um, like for the biggest words of like one of the bigger phrases in like King James Version Bible. I'm not real sure as far as like the Book of Mormon, although the significance of the Mormon using the King James Version Bible, the Book of Mormon, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm kind of, here's the thing, okay, is that being a born American, okay, and being led to believe that just because I birthed like in a hospital in the Houston, Texas area would, not be a question. And when in fact, I guess that participation reflected just the assumption of insignificance, not necessarily a direction motivating, any other thought than a birth certificate being like, a citizen of the United States, and some idea of banking that would even give the perception of, uh, Federal Reserve note as the United States of America, and I mean, it doesn't really identify, at a degree level of reputable standards of consensual participation or the separation between church and state, or some idea, hey, you're still in the classroom over, a piece of paper, or some flat plane two-dimensional surface that might represent maybe what only monetary funding would only mean to, surfing the internet beyond the front lines of the beachfront, of, making a grade beyond the internet protocol of a local area network, which is pretty much the principle of, like, surfing, the internet, and the memorial as compared to, the monastery, giving the same impression of, making a grade, and a little bit maybe, thought of like 3D isometrics, three-dimensional, isometrics. It gives the impression, a little bit more than like the light scribe isometrics of, Braille. It's the Jose can you see thing, kind of like, idea with like the relation thing about the, computer language and computer programming and language of like a architecture and platform. And, it doesn't really, I've really kind of like thought about the McDonald's Golden Arches representing the degree level representatives of consistent participation and what the goal is to, Calamity Jane and the clam and the stream and the jet stream, and the thought of, some misappropriation allocation to Mississippi in a way of like, it has to be ratio or scale or HTTP colon representing, the thing about the, the vertical side of what would be normally predominantly the thought of, the at sea, the two period, the dots, and what the dot is horizontally as compared to, and I'm pretty sure that the et seq would probably be more so of the initial, if not acronym or combine of like, both alphanumerics and linguistics combined with the et seq, as compared to sequencing or, some idea of like a ET and some idea of, entertainment law and we international, that way with the et seq and sequencing. Although the abbreviation and the initials and all that with the two dots would be in my mind the thought of like what the colon would be vertically, representing some idea of what etseq is in waveform, as a quantum, not necessarily the quantum theory, but based upon a symbolic, schematic, analytical. It really has gotten to something, in my mind about the alphanumerics and linguistics combine that way of like the McDonald's golden arches representing, the gold going up and down, as compared to, the fish seems to be the real deal about, the American history that way, and originating, even, with the Native American Indian, and predominantly based upon the behavior of an American Indian, having the civilized taming factor, that actually included, the uniform in a way, okay? Not necessarily that it would be anything other than maybe the thought of like what a reserve as compared to reservation would only mean, of aggregates and expenditures that way beyond the executive classroom, and what behavior is on an everyday for any and everyone that would maybe not see behavior as a Native American Indian that would result in some idea, not necessarily a constellation. If the whole idea is ultimately the accusation of a participating factor, whether it's participating, even having the idea of like, de facto, or litigation, or, the impression of like, multinational corporations or multi-international banking systems representing, some idea of like circuit as hubs of, what we're representing a human capital in a way of like it doesn't really have to be, in anyone's mind that it just has to be an exchange commission. The thing with this is that there's some idea of like having the right to assemble might even give the impression of like, maybe some idea of like a NATO in the way of like a North American Free Trade Act and NAFTA as compared to, North Atlantic Treaties Organization or the North Atlantic Peace Treaties Organization as compared to North American Free Trade Act. And those seem to be the two, and the significance there with what really seems to be ultimately leading to Geneva, Switzerland of, and how true it is. If it's just a Houston, Texas area thing as far as like linguistics itself goes, and Univ in that way, identifying a building that's identified as human civil rights, okay, in Geneva, Switzerland. It's ultimately designating, the B and venue only alphanumerically suggesting somewhere in like Latin terminology, the word, the phrase, using being, BEIN, given the normal perception of maybe like what a human being would be. I mean, like going through a circuit, okay, and ultimately being, some idea of the Stargate program. I mean, even knowing that memory has been ultimately a huge determining factor of even whether if stars were actually participating or not. What would be the normal perception of a circuit became like the idea of like far beyond, what would be normally some idea, a thought of a normal description of a circuit, and anything beyond what really, obviously, the memory issue, realizing that, other factors, beyond what would be like some idea of the normal thought of like what a circuit is or is not. And ultimately, at other locations that would be, some idea of like of the Stargate program. The Stargate program, although there had been like, certain factors of like stars being involved, and even at the time, it didn't even, register in my mind really as a Stargate program. But, okay, this is like the year 2000, August like 10th, 2024. And going through the Stargate program, ultimately, wasn't my idea of like an entire life and like being naive to the whole entire point about, hey, like how's it going to happen? I mean, what was it like not realizing that, like, everyone you've ever known, it's kind of like, well, that's kind of like thinking, you go, be kidding me, everyone I've ever known. Or is it like, who really wants to go through that? Or is that like electing a sperm bank, right? Or some, like, projected estimate option in the future, like, where someone's sperm might be, in maybe a 30 to 50-year period, after some, like, idea of, like, masturbation being, like, some idea, of, like, Washington, D.C., or some idea. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, all that alphanumeric stuff about, some idea of like, leading the way with the innovation, or some like, hood ornament, some rectangular thing in need of like some like 360, like volume, and some in a more, a more informative presentation, more adequate direction, beyond the ergonomic factor, like some novelty item like on a hood ornament for like the accuracy is a main mandated mandatory like requirement for like accuracy, okay? And the thing of it is that really, ultimately it seems to be like ultimately that, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to some idea of like a direction in the way, I mean, ultimately it really seems to be whether or not if anatomy is going to be, ultimately, getting to the part of whether or not if memory is going to be, like a really a factor, or some like idea of like, who's really in control of like uh, what participation means, or some ideas of projected estimate, some like telepathic brainwaves, and for it is written stuff about just like geographic attachment in Pearland, Texas, or some idea of like uh, whether or not some like idea about telepathic brainwaves in Chevrolet Silverado and Z71 or Galveston County, and Los Angeles area code 213 and Z71 thing about Pearland, or the Chevrolet Camaro IROC Z28 is ultimately getting to the food ornament of like a international financial management. Predominantly, it seemed to be the thing about the the Lincoln Continental in the way of what Abraham Lincoln night vision is in the Stargate program. The thought of like like who's the entire world going to choose to use to represent maybe an entire like world of alphanumerics, like what's it like to live in Pearland? Huh. In any case, yeah. So like I mean, it's like a phenomenally huge secret. It's amazing. It's like really. I mean, is it really a secret, or is it like, or is it just like me? It's like everyone knows. It's like everyone on the entire planet knows. Yeah. So like anyway, yeah. So I've got to the point about even television programming and networking that way. Think about some idea of like a certain factors that memory had become the idea of whether or not that being in total complete disbelief of certain factors of like just watching like YouTube, and me being a musician, okay. Okay, it's predominantly my thought of like something retroactive as far as like retroactive future, going through a Stargate program, and as you see the lighting like with laser technology, which is like one of the cooler lasers that I have that has the automated option of automation as far as like a sequencing different like a visual patterns as you're seeing like right now on me and like right behind me and like all along the and right now I'm inside of a tent and in my own home in the cathedral like living room and like what's really been going on, okay? And it seemed to me like really that ultimately some idea of like a um, for it is written seemed to be like one of the bigger parts about the mind's eye thing of like a military barrel deterrent. It seems to be somewhere in my mind. It's kind of like a when I realized for the first time really that memory had been a factor was like really probably when Microsoft was presenting a multiple what would be like a PowerPoint presentation of like different screensavers. And then I noticed that it's like really I wasn't like in control of it or looking for it. It's just like it was just like happening on my laptop. And I realized like over maybe a 4 or 5 period year, okay, after like what would be my thought of like really beginning, as a preliminary, I guess now I would say that a preliminary like towards the end of like 1993 going into 1994. So the demanded like requirement of participation and what that means in venue, right? So not to excuse the thought of like what a normal daily standard transaction at the bank means in storage area network as compared to some of the securities and annuities. Some I wouldn't really call it really an identity crisis. I mean, but would anyone even know the difference really? I mean, really at all? I mean, really an identity crisis? I mean, or would that be maybe the thought of maybe like a high school yearbook and like driver's education and you got to be kidding me. And once again, when does it matter most to the Department of Public Safety or, with a high school yearbook when the driver's education is at the high school and the publisher's version that doesn't even publish their name, address, street, city, state, zip code, phone number, email, anything. I mean, how does that happen? I mean, is it the insignificance of not bringing it to the attention, or is it the thought of like immigration customs enforcement using the front lines of the beach run of international financial management to define the meaning of only what having fair use of the intellectual property would only mean, whether it's a known or not known fact. I mean, really, I mean, it's so like not taught or talked about. It's unreal that really I'm even talking about it now. And so many things have happened. I mean, if there's like not anything that I've covered that seems to be significance of like going through something like that, or even knowing that as compared to monetary domestic gross national product of aggregates would even represent some idea of expenditures based upon some idea of like going beyond the idea of like a state, federal, local authorities designating some idea of like whether the domestic clause is only reflecting that statement as why one pronoun of the 4 types of pronoun cannot be used as a subject. I mean, is it only federal, state, and local? They'll only present, the idea of something beyond like W television and radio and K television and radio in the way of like above it all, beyond what would be normal perception. Then the thought like everything you've ever known is not the way it is, kind of like perception. In any case, so it's kind of like focusing on the memory and realizing that really I started actually considering, what had really begun, really an entire lifetime, really. But going through the circuit and, some of the most intensive parts being like 1994, 1995, and 1996, the first 4 years and 3 months. Being the thought of like, my thought of like 1995 in the World Trade Center, because it convinced me that there was anything other than 1995 and the World Trade Center as compared to only information provided that I know of on television in the year 2001, and a difference of 6 years. And how I've mentioned, like a Six Flags amusement park and certain factors involving, Astroworld thing, and Six Flags being, for a short while, maybe 2 or 3 years, I think, Astroworld turned to Six Flags and moved to, San Antonio. I think it's like Fiesta Six Flags, Fiesta San Antonio. But anyway, yeah, so like that as well as, Dallas. But anyway, it's like all the afternoons between ABC 13 to ABC 7 in Los Angeles being a difference of 6, and, Theodore to Franklin Roosevelt being six presidential terms in that way, and the list goes on and on. It seems to be, the idea of like a six, alphanumerically being like a 52 in the VPN or vice president network, normally even identified as, the ice capades or some idea of like international financial management, the front lines of the beachfront, introducing some idea of like what intellectual property is in international law, what royalties generate some idea of intellectual property in the form of like royalties or like just having the information, the meaning, value of the content, and what having fair use is of normally intellectual property anyway. What human capital means that way, or like not at all, or some idea of like a zero on a driver's license, or some like reaching zero issue, or some like telepathic accusation. It's like, oh my God, like there's someone who actually believes all that's like going on, and like having fair use of like information is like resulting in hey, like here I am right now. You got to be kidding me. It's like I'm at age 59. And Highway 59 being like the average 140 in Pearland, Texas, or some idea of like a Univision and what was that? The Houston Post said the intersecting factor of Highway 59, West Loop 610, and some idea of like legal media and deposition between the thought of like a transaction debate in the form of the Houston Post presenting some like articles of incorporation that would only maybe suggest maybe some chronological issues that would present more the now thing, the during as compared to the Post and the Chronicle. What was in the Houston Chronicle, given the perception of like the now of current issues that reflect terminology that way would even be comparable to like legal media deposition of like television programming of like MP4 format and like television being 130 and electronic God, or some idea of like a telepathic map and or a telepathic eagle and what that is. So PG-13 and a W2 in that way of like all that. But anyway, yeah. So like I was thinking about something about that because memory. When I really knew that memory was like really a major factor was like when I was watching and looking at the screensaver being sequenced like a PowerPoint presentation of like it being a Microsoft, and there's like a picture of like Europe's like wealthiest museum, and the picture's like a checkered marble floor with like white ivory like marble, and like a charcoal gray like marble, like a checkerboard in the floor with like white statues in a hallway. And that's when I knew that's one of the locations that I was actually taken to about Europe, and even being able to remember anything about it was like they had Microsoft had sequence. I mean, that's when I really knew without doubt, really for the first time. I mean, I kind of suspected it that way, but when I realized that was like the one I really knew, it was that one particular screensaver actually had been taken there, and what that is, to some idea of like and how true it is, whether or not it's the GIT, geospatial information technology. I mean, if that's the idea of what quality is inside of like building maintenance, building automation systems, or my thought of like how true it is, I'm not real sure, but the GIT, okay, geospatial information technology. And I was actually trying to find out some information, and actually my interest with the geospatial information technology wasn't motivated in any kind of way or any idea of overriding some idea of like building automation systems, okay? But the thing about the World Trade Center is some like a idea of like subconsciousness minus chase. Ultimately, Alphabet's 181 Houston, Texas, Electronic Power, and We International, and Selective Service, and like some other factors had become, the idea of like, some really intense issues that like put my direction, and more so of like database administration and certain factors of networking, that my interest like was like going that direction like anyway, and with the idea of like what embedded encryption is to like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as compared to the equator and the operator, or some 90 degree of the absolute zero as a point of origin of like military time, representative of like the Lincoln Continental Corps and Abraham Lincoln Night Vision. The Stargate program has ultimately gotten to two locations that I'd mentioned before, and like the B&B in Geneva, Switzerland. The the description of the building itself may have been both in combine, but the human civil rights issue being the thought of like a human capital and investment terminology going through like a Stargate program of like the aggregates monetary domestic gross national product of like aggregates of like circuit of you know seemingly like Federal Reserves, not limited to an idea of like a multinational corporations and international banking systems that way like what it means in international financial management, the acronym SAN software as compared to like storage area network or securities and annuities or what human capital obviously means now more so I mean not thinking like this now like obviously maybe still some idea of like subsurface idea like stationary engineering yeah like an appraisal of a resurrection okay but in case yeah so like all that tombstone pizza hey you got there's like an actual added feature to like CC's Pizza and like some mechanics in like a Leaning Tower of Pizza. He's got the CC's Pizza double / thing about it, right? Hey, all right, yeah. Hey, all right, yeah. So it is. I was kind of like thinking about that because like certain factors are like I'm a musician, okay. Truthfully, in any case, like when I really started doing YouTube.com, me being on drums, actually using YouTube as a and whoever's doing it, I really wish would really stop putting that digitized like distorting visual and put the the like the 1010 like clarity in it and quit like doing the whatever Wi-Fi manager webmaster or like who's bartering, trading, negotiating mood altering perception yeah quality okay so like it'd be like really I don't know if it has to be just like substantiated. See, that was like being honest, if you like, you would not do that, okay? In any case, yeah, so like, in the way that, the forward is written seemed to be the thing of, when it matters most, it seemed to be the military barrel determinant, okay, of the mind's eye. And there's like certain factors of like, and when I was like watching like television, even more so like the YouTube thing, it seemed more and more and more and more videos, locations, everything about it's kind of like, I mean, it's like phenomenally, yeah. So like and more songs in different locations, of like during the intense part of like I mean, yeah, an appraisal of the resurrection, like during that like military burial determinant and some certain factors of like forward is written when the mind's eye seemed to be like in my mind, even like a Native American Indian. Burial that would like simulate a song like in my mind would lift it high thing about some idea of like a Native American Indian being lifted up on a platform and being burned like a cremation, and even certain locations that's kind of like triggering a thought in my mind of like certain factors likewise in addition certain other factors that would even present the airport thing of like my question in my mind and I'd ask it and I have tried to find out and I really can't get a word out anyway if a military bill of deterrent is focusing on just a central time zone as like a determinant representing, the thought of like maybe a nation or an actual point of like what would be a known birth. Some idea, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to like the American thing as compared to the degree level like earning and accomplishing, going beyond being led to believe that just being born in a hospital in North America automatically makes a person like a United States citizen and automatically an American, and maybe not have the idea, like maybe going beyond, thought of like just thinking that just because like have a birth certificate that it's not in the same location as the Bureau of Vital Statistics, and what that is to some sub-sea level issues like the equator, or what the real deal is about television programming that way, or the Stargate program. But anyway, yeah, so there was like something about like a Native American Indian burial deterrent and being lifted up and being put on a platform. And there's like another location for like the airports, like in the mind's eye thing about like being like the thought of like at an airport a long distance and like the podium thing and the picture of like something there. How true it is if it's the Boeing in Chicago. I mean, knowing what I know about the Pearland area, and some idea that would give the impression of Boeing, and some idea of Chicago. Um, yeah, so there's like something about the mind's eye, and something in that way. But those are the two, and really not limited to at all, other location that would represent maybe the thought of a direction of like the incoherence. Okay, that is described. Okay, it's really in my mind the thing about the air quality and being asleep. Well, considerable amount had happened, and I think there's like a 6 month period. I would almost have to say a 6 month period, if not 9 month period, of even being able to remember anything or even recognizing. I mean, anything about it at all. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's kind of like when I remember going through certain factors like world news, like on television, talking about the fumes, the air. It's like it's colorless, it's odorless. You can't even see the fumes, you can't smell it, see it, or anything, or it doesn't even make your like tear ducts like secrete like fluid. It's like what would be presenting some idea of like saline solution. Okay, but anyway, yeah. So like and something like that happened. Like I was on the toilet. It's like and all of a sudden it's like I wake up and like several minutes later, I don't even know how I got on the floor, but like I was on the toilet. Okay, when it happened. Okay, and world news was like on television talking about all that stuff. Okay, and that it's colorless, it's odorless. You can't see it, you can't smell it, and there's no like fumes, like certain other gases like that take place going through some idea of like that would even represent some idea of temperature as compared to what might be only the idea of like as a molecular catalyst that would maybe represent some abnormal activity that would present a visual that would normally be maybe invisible, like normal, every breath, every thing about like air quality, and not be the question. But the thing of it is that like some of that information is like pretty much the thing about what's going on at specific location, and like information being presented on world news and national news about that one specific thing, and actually not even realizing hey that it really been happening. I mean, really for real. But anyway, yeah. So like I just want to say that because um, certain factors about that, and Ford is written in the mind's eye thing about it, and I want to say that about the platform and how true it is. At some point, but it seems to be like there's like several bands, several songs about being lifted up and all that, and that I want to include that as well. But I don't even know what time it is. I just woke up and decided I was going to say something about it because there was like some other information I was wanting to talk about. But I mean, why not? In any case, so like my thing about it's not so much about the memory or some like idea of like an academic experience, although recognizing that it's most definitely a degree thing really beyond the way it's taught or was taught anyways, like the cartoon with the eyes being represented with two plus signs. Okay, and I've mentioned it before. It seems to me that's probably the one and only way, and when it really matters most, it's just remembering that cartoon, and how alphanumerics linguistics, and anyone who like studies alphanumerics linguistics will ultimately, I mean, if they've really been anything academic in high school, and algebra would automatically, eventually maybe consider the thought of like, the algebraic test of inversion of does or does not equal, does the answer result, does the answer equal or does not equal the result, does the answer equal the result or not, and what that is, it applies to alphanumerics and linguistics that way. And the thought of that, that one, vertical or diagonal, does not equal being the thought of like, two horizontals is an equal sign, applied to, the one minus sign of alphanumerics. It's kind of like you got to pretend there's not supposed to be a minus sign in alphanumeric equation. And then, the incoherence part, I mean, if that's really what the deal is, and even realizing now the connectivity, what I was like really studying and like seeing a whole bunch of equations, alphanumerics, and may not have even realized my own connectivity of actually answering, the thing about, the cartoon and driver's education of the cartoon about the incoherence. And the way it's taught in driver's education, it represented that cartoon with like, the eyes being represented with the plus signs. I mean, now it's like not hard for me to see the algebraic test of inversion of does or does not equal, and the thought of a remainder being applied to the negative during alphanumerics going through the Stargate program, which seems to be the whole entire point of like when it, I mean, matters, I mean, the most. It may not have even realized, I mean, all the information that I'm talking about was most definitely like what it's like writing it alphanumerics, but not attaching any kind of connectivity in any kind of way and segregated yet not attached in my direction and intent that way. But the information there, whether it be scattered, attached, or whatever, like it was all there, okay? Like going through all that, okay? It's kind of like, it seemed to be like when it really mattered most. Is now it's kind of like I see the significance, and there's probably not any other better way at all than that one cartoon identifying, the thought of like incoherence, which is normally identified in driver's education involving barbiturates and alcohol, and that's really not it. Like going through the Stargate program as far as like air quality and what was now not even the thing about driver's education or the cartoon, yet that was something going on in my mind and having the connectivity of like alphanumerics and linguistics that way, which is the cartoon, with like a remainder of the does or does not equal applied to the one minus sign with a bunch of mental philosophy minus God, equals secret service, Holy Spirit, and selective servers, and all that stuff, and the telepathic power minus 26 God or game card lie, and yay the as Americans hot dogs and apple pie thing, and all that stuff about it, and the remainder is kind of like the incoherent thing about hey, there's not supposed to be a minus sign, and I actually have the information and realizing that the incoherence probably was already like me having an idea of like information and not even realizing that the incoherence may have been just simply knowing something, not having the connectivity in my own mind of like what I was like really directing my intention alphabetically going through the entire situation, okay? But yeah, so I think that's probably the best and the only way. That one deal about the cartoon representing the I being the plus sign, being the two plus signs, and ultimately the algebraic test of inversion, and the minus sign, or the thing about the minus base and the idea of like the 1951 Universal Magic Encyclopedia about the only two words that's really not defined, and the thing about the E equal MC squared and the pi r squared and exponential quotients of powers of multiplication. But yeah, it's already going on like 37 minutes and like 19 seconds. But yeah, I want to say that about the mind's eye and some idea about a military bill of deterrent, because the word itself, deterrent, okay, it's like a D and E is like like the fourth and fifth letter being 45 likewise, as compared to a combine of like 9 being the ninth letter, and the I and the that 35 thing about memory minus tobacco, and Austin Powers, Woodbine, Imperial Eagle, and the thing about all the pronunciation and alphanumerics and combine and all that way. But yeah, I wanted to include that because I'm going to try to lay it on down and get some more sleep. But I want to include that real quick because it seemed to be some significance of the nativity point of origin, okay, as like a Native American Indian, based on the only thing about what seems to be the whole entire idea, like identifying the reserve and only using the behavior as a reserve, predominantly, more so I would say, a combine of having the idea of like non-degree is, having academics anyway. Yeah, so like as compared to degree, non-degree, or what non-negotiable, non-transferable optimization means, and even circuit involving the idea of like HOA, HOA, homeowners association, and GMAC, General Motors Exception Corporation, and promissory notes, and some kind of mediation of like promissory notes representing some idea of like a method of banking, as compared to obviously the combine of like paper, as compared to only electronic, that ultimately seems to be thought the International Electrical Electronic Engineering, that the symbolic representation between the C and the PTIs to the upper right of the I, the pyramid on the backside of the US $1, and ultimately the same symbol represented in the European standard of the International Electrical Electronic Engineering, and all that connectivity of the Mediterranean, and ultimately getting to the Sea of Galilee, and like measuring one cycle half above and half below, and the more than out thing, and even the American history of Calamity Jane and Pony Express and prepaid postage, of like even the fish swimming upstream, about the clams in the river, like being baptized during the gold rush, panting for gold, the thing about, clams in the stream, or some misappropriation allocation in the Mississippi, and ACTP, colon, presenting the colon as like idea of ratio of the International Space Station and International Superstar as compared to supplemental security or superstar intelligence. I mean, might as well be a superstar. Yeah. So like anyway, like I'm on YouTube at WadeASVPriddy PRIDDY at YouTube.com. Predominantly, been using, and really I hadn't in for several years because there's like been a lot going on. Like I'm inside of a tent, okay, and like I could go on and on. I've talked quite a bit about it, but somebody did like some retroactive features. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I thought I'd include that right now. I'm gonna. Sorry, going on 40 minutes and like right at like 30 seconds, but I won't include that much about it right there. And all right, it's break time.